$400 million. 3 countries, 1 network designed to buy America from the inside. Tonight, we reveal who built it and who protected it.
40:47 a.m., Copenhagen, Denmark. The air temperature was -6 degrees Celsius. Frost clung to the windows of parked cars along Istegade Street like white scars. The canals had frozen at their edges, and the only sound in the Vesterbro district was the distant hum of a cargo ship passing through the Øresund Strait toward the Baltic Sea. Then came the helicopter. 3 Danish police special intervention units descended from the darkness. Simultaneously, 12 FBI agents who had been embedded with Danish National Police for the previous 6 weeks moved from their staging positions in unmarked vehicle. They wore black tactical gear with American flag patches on their shoulders and Danish police credentials around their necks. This was a joint operation, codename RCTC UDGER. The primary target was a 4-story building that appeared from the outside to be an artisanal coffee roastery and co-working space. Instagram, ready exposed brick. Scandinavian minimalist furniture visible through frosted window. The kind of place digital nomads would photograph for their lifestyle blogs. But below that building, accessible only through a freight elevator hidden behind industrial shelving in the basement, was something else entirely. The breach happened at 4:51 a.m. Flashbang grenades shattered the pre-dawn silence. Glass exploded inward. Agents in black moved through the building like shadows with heartbeats, clearing rooms in seconds. 3 security personnel were subdued before they could reach their weapon. 2 financial analysts, working overnight in the underground server room, attempted to trigger a remote data wipe. They failed. An FBI cyber specialist had already isolated the network 47 seconds before the first door was breached. What agents found in that basement changed everything. Rows of servers humming in climate-controlled silence. Screens displaying real-time wire transfers between shell companies in Tallinn, Nicosia, and the Cayman Island, and mounted on the wall like a trophy, a framed organizational chart showing the entire network, not hidden, not encrypted, displayed openly, because the people who built this system never believed anyone would get this far. The chart showed everything. Fake green energy investment funds, fraudulent agricultural export company, ghost corporations that existed only on paper, registered in jurisdictions where questions were never asked and answers were never required. But that wasn't what made the FBI team leader radio back to Washington with urgency in his voice. What made him reach for his secure satellite phone was the name at the top of the chart, and the line connecting that name to a code phrase that American intelligence had been tracking for over 2 years. BORRELSACSOUNT. The same phrase that had appeared in intercepted communications between sanctioned Russian oligarchs and unknown European intermediary. The same phrase connected to suspicious investments in American port infrastructure, telecommunications companies, and even a failed bid to acquire a regional American defense contractor. And now, for the first time, American agents had proof of who controlled it. 8:15 a.m. BI Cyber Forensics Division, Quantico, Virginia. 17 hours after the Copenhagen raid, encrypted data packages began arriving from Danish authorities under emergency intelligence sharing protocol. What happened next in that windowless laboratory would be described by one senior analyst as watching a tumor reveal itself under a microscope. The forensics team worked in shifts. Specialists in financial crimes sat beside experts in Russian organized crime networks. Linguists who could read Danish, Estonian, and Russian legal documents worked alongside blockchain analysts who could trace cryptocurrency movements across dozens of wallets. What they found was not a criminal organization. It was an economic weapon. The network had a name. Internal documents referred to it as the Nordistram ATIV, not to be confused with the gas pipeline. This was something else entirely, a systematic effort to exploit the trust that American financial institutions placed in Nordic banking system. Here is how it worked. Money originating from sanctioned Russian sources would enter the system through Estonian shell companies. These companies would purchase fraudulent invoices from Latvian trading firms for goods that were never manufactured and never shipped. The payments for these imaginary goods would flow through Danish banks, where compliant officials would certify the transactions as legitimate trade finance. Once the money was laundered through Copenhagen, it would re-emerge as clean Nordic investment capital. Investment capital that American regulators welcomed because it came from Denmark, from Scandinavia, from allies. That clean money then flowed into American infrastructure projects, real estate developments in Florida and Texas, minority stakes in telecommunications firms, consulting contracts with companies that did business with the Department of Defense. The analysts mapped it all. They found 23 American companies that had unknowingly accepted investment from this network. They found 6 political action committees that had received donations, traceable back through 4 layers of shell companies to the original Russian sources. And at the center of every major decision, every structural change, every new pathway for money to flow, they found the digital fingerprint of one man. Henrik Madsen, the fictional former trade minister, had not simply participated in this network. He had designed it. His encrypted authorization codes appeared on every significant document. His digital signature authenticated every major wire transfer. His name appeared in internal communications as ARCHITCT. This was not corruption in the traditional sense. This was not a politician taking bribes. This was a politician who had built an entire shadow financial system from the ground up. A system designed to make Denmark a laundromat for Russian money seeking access to American markets. And here is what made American investigators truly alarmed. The Nordstrom Identity was not complete. The documents showed expansion plans. Phase 2 called for penetrating American agricultural commodity markets. Phase 3 targeted American municipal bond markets. Phase 4, scheduled to begin implementation in 2026, aimed to establish what internal documents call permanent capital corridors that would allow Russian money to flow into American investments indefinitely, beyond the reach of any sanctions regime. The network had not simply infiltrated American economic security. It had designed a future where that infiltration would become invisible and irreversible. This is not fraud. This is not money laundering. This is economic warfare conducted in business suits and spreadsheets, and it was happening while most Americans were sleeping. But the operation had just begun, because Copenhagen was only the first domino. 50:30 a.m., February 26th, Joint Operations Command Center, undisclosed location, Northern Virginia. Dawn had not yet broken over the Potomac River when the secure facility's main display lit up with a map that made several senior officials physically step backward. Red markers pulsed across 3 continents: Copenhagen, Tallinn, Riga,
Nicosia, London,
Zurich, and then the American markers: Miami, Houston, Los Angeles, New York, Chicago. The Nordstrom Identity had tentacles everywhere, and today, those tentacles would be severed simultaneously. Operation RCTIT Ledijar was entering its second phase, and this time, American agencies would not be supporting European partners. They would be leading the charge on American soil. The mission commander addressed the assembled team: FBI agents, Treasury Department investigators, representatives from the Office of Foreign Assets Control, even observers from the Department of Defense, because some of the compromised investment targets had national security implications. Today, we execute the largest coordinated financial crime takedown in FBI history. 140, 7 federal agents, 3 simultaneous arrest operations, 17 search warrants, 6 foreign intelligence services cooperating in real time. Our targets include banking officials, investment fund managers, attorneys, and American business people who either knowingly or willfully ignored the origins of the money they were accepting. The room was silent except for the hum of servers and the distant sound of helicopters being prepped outside. Some of these people will claim they didn't know. Some will claim they were deceived, but the evidence we have gathered over the past 72 hours proves otherwise. They knew, they profited, and today, they answer for it. The operations began at 6:00 a.m. across all American time zones. In Miami, FBI agents raided the offices of a real estate development company that had accepted $47 million in investment from Nordstrom-linked shell companies. The firm's managing partner attempted to flee through a service entrance. He was stopped by agents who had been waiting in the parking garage for 6 hours. In Houston, Treasury investigators served seizure warrants on 3 bank accounts belonging to an energy consulting firm. The accounts contained $19 million that forensic analysis had traced back through Estonian shell companies to original sources in Moscow. In Phoenix, a prominent immigration attorney was arrested at his home while eating breakfast with his family. Documents recovered from his office showed he had structured visa applications for European investors who were actually couriers carrying cash between Nordstrom nodes. In Los Angeles, FBI agents executed a search warrant on a venture capital firm that had invested in American technology startups using funds from the network. Servers seized from the firm's offices would later reveal communications showing the founders knew their investors were European clients who valued discretion above documentation. In New York, the raid was the largest. Agents simultaneously hit 3 locations in Manhattan and 2 in Brooklyn. They arrested a former Danish banking official who had fled Copenhagen ahead of the first raid. They seized 2 luxury apartments that had been purchased entirely with laundered funds, and they served a subpoena on one of the largest Danish investment banks operating in the United States. By noon Eastern Time, 31 arrests had been made across 6 American cities. Bank accounts containing over $1 $190 million had been frozen, and prosecutors were already preparing indictments that would eventually name 43 individuals across 4 countries. But the investigation was not finished because the deeper agents looked, the more they found. What happened next shocked even veteran investigators. The analysis of seized servers in Copenhagen had revealed something unexpected. Communication logs, encrypted but now broken. Messages between Henrik Madsen and individuals who should never have been in contact with a network like this. 3 American attorneys specializing in foreign investment compliance. Their job was supposed to be protecting American companies from exactly this kind of infiltration. Instead, they had been coaching NOR DSTREM entities on how to structure transactions to avoid regulatory scrutiny. 2 former European Union trade officials. They had been providing advance notice of regulatory changes that might affect the network's operations. And most disturbing of all, a former American State Department analyst. Someone who had worked on sanctions policy against Russia. Someone who had inside knowledge of exactly which financial pathway American intelligence was monitoring and which ones they were not. The former analyst had left government service in 2021. By 2022, he was working as a consultant for a Copenhagen-based investment advisory firm, a firm that, investigators now realized, was entirely controlled by the NOR-DSTREM network. He had been selling American intelligence capabilities to the people he was supposed to be fighting against. The betrayal cut deep. American agents who had spent years building sanctions frameworks watched as evidence emerged that their own former colleague had been mapping escape routes around their work. Every detection method they had developed, he had shared. Every enforcement priority they had set, he had revealed. One senior Treasury investigator was interviewed later about this moment. His words were simple but devastating. "We thought we were playing chess. Turns out they had someone behind us the whole time, telling them every move before we made it." The former analyst was arrested at his apartment in Arlington, Virginia at 4:30 p.m. on February 26th. He did not resist. He did not speak. He simply looked at the agents and said 4 words. "I want a lawyer." But the evidence against him would prove overwhelming. Communications, wire transferred, even a photograph recovered from Madsen's personal files, showing the 2 men together at a private reception in Copenhagen in 2023. This was not merely a financial crime network. This was an intelligence operation, and it had succeeded in penetrating American defenses for years before anyone noticed. Now here is where this story connects to something you have probably seen in the headline: the tariff threats. In late February 2025, discussions intensified in Washington about imposing significant tariffs on Danish goods. 50% was a number that circulated in some policy discussions. The rationale publicly cited involved trade imbalances and reciprocity concerns. But investigators working ARCTIC-LUDGR believed there was another dimension. The NOR-DSTREM network had been funneling Russian money through Danish financial systems for years. That money had then flowed into American investments, American political organizations, and American infrastructure. Denmark's regulatory systems had either failed to detect this or had been compromised into ignoring it. The tariff discussions represented something more than trade policy. They represented accountability, a signal that financial infiltration through allied nations would have consequences. Documents recovered from the Copenhagen raid showed that Madsen and his network had been monitoring these policy discussions closely. Internal communications revealed growing alarm as American rhetoric intensified. One message, sent just 3 days before the raid: "Reedy, the Americans are serious. They are connecting the dots. We need to accelerate the closure of European accounts and shift to alternative corridors immediately." They had been trying to shut down the network before American investigators could reach it. They had failed by approximately 72 hours. The timing of Operation ARCT-LUDGR was not coincidental. American intelligence had learned of the planned network shutdown and moved their timeline forward to prevent evidence destruction. The coordination between tariff policy discussions and law enforcement operations demonstrated a level of strategic integration that had rarely been seen before. Economic policy had become national security policy, and national security policy had teeth. In the weeks following the raids, the full scope of the NOR-DSTREM INEDIATIV became clear. Over $400 million laundered. Dozens of American companies unknowingly accepting Russian origin investment. Political action committees receiving donations from sources that ultimately traced back to sanctioned individuals, and a network that had been designed to expand indefinitely, creating permanent pathways for foreign money to influence American markets and potentially American politics. Henrik Madsen remains at large as of this telling. Danish authorities issued a warrant for his arrest, but he had departed Copenhagen approximately 18 hours before the first raid. Intelligence suggests He may have fled to a jurisdiction with limited extradition cooperation. The search continues. The former American State Department analyst was indicted on 17 counts including conspiracy, money laundering, and violations of the Espionage Act. His trial is pending. The 3 American attorneys who provided compliance advice to the network were disbarred and indicted. 2 have pleaded guilty to reduced charges in exchange for cooperation. The third is contesting the charges. Banking officials in Denmark, Estonia, and Latvia have been arrested by their respective national authorities. Several have already received prison sentences. Others await trial. And the money, approximately $230 million, has been recovered or frozen. The remainder is believed to be dispersed across jurisdictions where recovery may prove impossible. Now here is what you need to understand, and this is important. What happened in Copenhagen was not an isolated incident. It was a window into how modern economic warfare actually works. There are no soldiers. There are no bombs. There are spreadsheets and shell companies and compliant banking officials who ask no questions because they profit from silence. The Nord-Osram, Inanu was designed to be invisible. Its architects believed that money moving through trusted channels would never be questioned. They believed that American regulators would welcome Nordic investment without examining its origin. They believed that by the time anyone understood what was happening, it would be too late to stop. They were almost right. For years, the network operated without detection. Hundreds of millions of dollars flowed through its pathway. American companies accepted its investment. American political organizations took its donations. American infrastructure was quietly, incrementally, being connected to Russian money. And all of it was hidden behind the trust that Americans placed in their Scandinavian ally. That trust was exploited, weaponized, turned into a vulnerability. The people who built this network understood something fundamental about modern finance. Reputation is infrastructure. If you can hide behind a trusted name, you can move anything anywhere. Danish banking credentials opened doors that Russian credentials never could. Nordic investment funds received welcomes that Russian investment funds would never receive. The network did not try to break American defenses. It walked around them, using allies as shield, using trust as camouflage. And it almost worked. So what happens now? The investigations continue. More indictments are expected. Diplomatic discussions between the United States and Denmark have intensified, with both governments pledging to strengthen financial oversight and intelligence sharing. The tariff discussions remain active. American policymakers are examining whether economic pressure can be used to incentivize stronger compliance frameworks in partner nations. The argument is simple. If allied financial systems are being used to circumvent American sanction, then those systems cannot be treated as fully allied. And somewhere, in a jurisdiction that does not cooperate with American extradition requests, Henrik Madsen is presumably watching these developments, perhaps calculating his next move, perhaps believing he can rebuild what was destroyed. He would be wrong to believe that, because Operation ARSTAC La DGR demonstrated something important. The infrastructure that enables modern financial crime can be mapped. The networks can be traced. The individuals can be identified. It takes time. It takes resources. It takes international cooperation. But it can be done. And when it is done, the consequences are severe. Here is the truth that this story reveals. Power does not always announce itself. It does not always arrive with armies and demands. Sometimes power moves in wire transfers and corporate registrations and investment committee meetings. Sometimes power whispers instead of shouts. The Nord Stream was built on whispered, quiet agreements, discreet arrangement, the assumption that no one would ever look too closely because the money came from the right addresses. But whispers can be heard, arrangements can be discovered, and when the full picture finally emerges, it reveals something that should concern every citizen who believes in transparent markets and accountable government. The systems we trust can be turned against us. The allies we rely on can be compromised. The financial architecture that enables global commerce can also enable global corruption. The only defense is vigilance, transparency, the willingness to ask hard questions, even when the answers might be uncomfortable. Copenhagen taught us that lesson. $400 million and 3 years of infiltration taught us that lesson. The faces of 31 arrested individuals taught us that lesson. Trust but verify is not just a diplomatic phrase. It is a survival strategy. If you have watched this far, you understand something important. Stories like this do not tell themselves. They require attention. They require people who care enough to listen and to share. If this story matters to you, tap like so more people can see it. If you believe financial corruption should be exposed wherever it hides, comment EX posts below. And if you want to see more investigations into how power really works, subscribe and turn on notifications, because this is just one story. There are others. Networks that have not yet been discovered. Operations that have not yet been revealed. And the only way they come to light is if people keep watching, keep asking, keep demanding transparency. One final reminder before we close. This story is a fictional dramatization. The events, characters, and operations described were created for storytelling purposes to illustrate themes of financial crime, international cooperation, and economic security. While inspired by real concerns about money laundering and sanctions evasion, all specific individuals, corporate entity, and operational details are invented. Real investigations into financial crime are conducted by dedicated professionals at agencies like the FBI, Treasury Department, and their international partner. Their work is essential and often invisible. This story is a tribute to that work, not a replacement for accurate reporting about it. Thank you for watching. Stay vigilant. And remember, in a world where money moves at the speed of light, the only thing that travels faster is the truth when enough people demand to hear it.